That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello and welcome back to your favorite podcast, my favorite podcast, everyone's favorite podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is Reed Lackey. And guys, he was here a minute ago, but said he had to go play in the sandbox. I don't know. I really got nothing this time, y'all. I mean, this is a wild movie. I don't know how you make light of it, but he's gone. Okay. And hopefully he'll be back. And because I don't want to do this whole thing without him. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you, listeners, back into this big series we've been doing this year. What scares us / what saves us, a series defined by you. Believe it or not, we're nearing the end of this phase of this series. We're going to have a fun middle section, and then we're going to go right back into it after that. If you've been buried alive in a coffin somewhere in the Middle East, you may not know that this series has been about listeners like you submitting stories of films and media that instilled or stoked a certain fearful imagining, and we have been covering them here on the show. But I am getting ahead of myself a bit, because here at the Fear of God, we explore. We do not explain, except for right now, when I explain that you can listen to the Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform. You can watch the Fear of God on YouTube, and you can browse so much on the Fear of God website at thefearofgodpodcast.com. You can buy merch there. You can find a whole bevy of new blog post series there. You can find Reed. Hey, buddy. Hey, man.
Hey, am I coming through okay? I've got good cell phone reception.
Good.
I'm good.
You do.
Yeah. Okay. It is really hard to make light of this movie.
It is very difficult.
Like this, what I was gonna say is like, oh yeah, I've just been feeling, overwhelmed, way over my head, in work, just sort of,
I really belabored over it, and I was like, screw it. I'm not. What are you gonna do without sounding like a complete jerk and feeling like a sensitive guy?
It's such a heavy movie.
So I just didn't. It is. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
Speaking of heavy things, how about a little bit of business?
Oh, well, that's okay. Sure. Yes. A little bit of business, a little bit of heavy business.
But you know what? Riri, this, I led in, I made that segue as though there was actually heaviness to discuss, but there's nothing heavy here, my brother. Reed, we are formally making a promotion. We're announcing a promotion on the show right now.
We don't get to do this very often. It's so fun.
We don't.
It's so fun.
Maybe
this is great.
Maybe we should pay better or something,
Oh, no. Yeah, now you're just crazy talking. Okay. So just
it's a promotion. It's like
just consider it that and be done.
It is a new title.
That is, it's one of those things where like you say, oh, I'm going to get a new title. Do I get more money? No, you don't. It's just the title's the gift. Okay. The title is what you're
getting your stuff out in the world, kid. Be happy with that.
Wow. You sound really slimeball.
I know. But before I dig too big a hole there and then jump in a box in it and then someone pour sand over it,
Oh my gosh.
The promotion we are set to announce here is a brand new staff member. Eagle-eyed listeners and viewers of the website may have already noticed this because it went up. What time is a face on the water when we record? So I don't know when it went up, but it's in the last week. Ladies and gentlemen, adding to the Fear of God staff on your website is Asia Schwarzentruber. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Asia. She's out there. She's putting her hands in the air, real celebratory style. I applaud you for that. Her title, Reed, I'm tempted to make you do it.
No, that's so stressful.
Don't be stressed out. We're all friends here. So Asia has been an active member of the Facebook group for some time now. Had a very unique sort of skill set that we thought would be fun to bring to bear on the horror genre. And she will be, for the foreseeable future, our horror enneagrammarian. That
horror Enneagrammarian
is an incredible word, and I love
it. I love it. It's wonderful.
You have already seen Asia exercising this skill set with our favorite continentals. Is that what people from the continent are called?
They've got little wheels on the front of them. Yeah. Like the little continentals.
So,
man, that's funny.
With Geralt of Rivia and Yennefer of Annaberg, she analyzed them, and I love it. I love it.
Y'all, it's impressive.
It gave weight and heft to these two characters that we sort of poked fun at over time. And reading her stuff, I really felt bad for my occasional commentary about The Witcher, because she did a bang up job showing us what the Enneagram can do for these characters that we know and love. So you will be definitively seeing her more on the show, or hearing her more on the show in audio form, seeing it in YouTube form, as well as she will be popping up on the website in the foreseeable future with this horror Enneagrammarian craft that she's going to bring to bear on characters that we love. So welcome to the party. Welcome to the staff, Asia. As they used to say in X-Men comics in the 80s, hope you survive.
Wow. That's
it's weird. They'd be like, welcome to the X-Men, Kitty Pryde, hope you survive.
Wow.
That's how a lot of comic covers went in the 80s.
These are bleak.
It is. So that's a huge announcement. That's big.
That's very big.
It's like a major award, you know.
it's a major award. Fragile. Let's be Italian.
What else is there, Reed? What else?
So, what's funny is, okay, so I would just ask the listeners to stay tuned for a later segment for something that I think would be more appropriate when we announce it, like when it is proximal to actually making its appearance in the show. But I'm just going to say on this episode, I'm just going to say, to tease it out here, we have some amazing listeners, and you all, if you think it's just the facetious thing that podcast hosts say, we love you all. You are sometimes so game for just like the biggest little surprises and delights to just drop into us. And so later in the episode, later in the episode, you are going to get a real treat. It was a surprise to us and is going to be a perpetual surprise for all of you. So, but I think while I should tease it in business time, just stay tuned. It will be happening later in this episode, and you'll know it when you hear it. So, but yeah, it's awesome. It's really cool. But no, that's about all I had for business time.
Our business.
So, actually, we're rounding the corner on this first wave of 2021, and we've been diving into all year the hashtag What Scares Us model. So we have some fun things planned that we won't announce for another couple of weeks, but some really fun things on the horizon for the summer. It's going to be a summer breakout, summer kind of party, if you will. But so we're going to be doing that in just a few weeks. But since we are winding down this series, as we'd mentioned before, we've tried to cover as many people as possible. Didn't quite get to every submission, but we thought it might be cool to show some of the things that a couple of people submitted more than one thing to us, and
for what scares us.
For what scares us, yes, because we had been inviting so we had been inviting everybody to submit to us ideas for what scares you, and we made some selections from there. But there were some really cool entries that we never got to. So, I figure maybe we could read a few of those. Maybe we'll do the same thing in the next couple of weeks before we wind this all down, if you're game for that. So, you want to do that just real quick? So I'm actually gonna lead with it. It's somewhat short, and we'll be hearing from him a little bit later. I just thought this was succinctly so well put from Ernst Mantler, who actually helped program this actual episode. So you'll be hearing directly from Ernst a little bit later. But Ernst Mantler had also submitted to us. He said, "My brother likes showing me movies that'll scare the crap out of me, and one of the firsts growing up was Cujo. So for many years, I was uncomfortable around dogs." And then you have to kind of see it to appreciate it. But he said this movie did, not help, period.
I've still not seen or read Cujo. Maybe we should
really
for a quarterly king. I mean, I know what it's about, but I've not seen it or read it.
Sure. No. Cujo is gnarly. And I will say that the ending of the book is different from the movie and significantly bleaker. I will just drop that in. Maybe
you're saying the movie is bleaker than the book, or reverse?
The book is one of his bleakest endings to any piece of material. So yeah, well,
they're like morph into Old Yeller,
wow, no,
it's not out in the woodshed.
It's not quite that. So,
you're like, no, it's not that bleak.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy and it's pretty rough. But anyway, but yes, Cujo is legit. Cujo is strong. We should cover it at some point. What do you want to?
All right, I'm gonna pick one here. Personal friend, former FOG staffer. Speaking of Meredith Curran. So Meredith is a horror super fan. She's a FOG super fan. You'll see her around the Facebook group occasionally. She shared, and I kind of wish we'd gotten to some of these, but there's goodness gracious, dude, it's June. I don't know if you.
I know.
Meredith said, "It took me a while to narrow this down. I have so many great memories being scared as a kid, and it's hard to choose between the cackling corpse in Tales from the Dark Side and the contorted woman who crawls out of the car in the Mouth of Madness, neither of which I've seen. Let's all say it in unison." She says, "That ain't right." But what stands out to me the most is Creepshow 2, particularly, and I assume she's referencing one of the shorts in that, The Raft.
Yes, that's right.
I spent a lot of time on the lake as a kid, and the thought of man-eating sludge wading in the algae-covered wings felt very real as a child. What scared me even more is watching it as an adult and realizing how inappropriate it is for children.
Absolutely. Yes. I do have a soft spot for Creepshow too. Maybe someday at some point we're going to cover it because it's one of those that, like I've mentioned before, where I think in weird time travel recording thing, we've recorded an episode that has not aired yet, where I mentioned that sometimes sometimes I love or react strongly to sequels even more so than their originals. And Creepshow 2 is also kind of in that category. I'm very, very fond of it. Funny story about Creepshow 2, and then I'll share another What Scares Us submission. Is I think I've told this story on pod, so I'll just breeze through it. Is when I was younger and I always loved like scary stories and stuff, I asked my cousin one time when he was kind of babysitting me, and I asked him to tell me some scary stories if he knew any, like some ghost stories and stuff like that. And he began to share with me this just, story after story after story that I didn't realize until later he was sharing with me Stephen King stories that he was briefly summarizing and sort of sharing them. Like he shared Thinner with me, and then he had told me,
but presented them as just scary stories.
I've
never heard that story from you, so that's fun. That's
cute. Yeah. So I have this very distinct memory of us just hanging out.
Alan or Wayne?
To be honest, so they're twins, and I cannot remember which one it was. I cannot remember if it was Alan or Wayne. My memory hysterical. Is, I know, right? Because they're twins. But my memory is that it was Wayne, but I cannot say that. Well, yeah,
they were subbing themselves out for each other.
Who knows? I can't remember. But I remember it being Wayne, but it could have just as easily been Alan. I don't remember, but they are twins, listeners. My cousins are twins.
We will be sure to tag them on this episode.
Yeah, and I was like 7 or 8 years old, so I do not remember which one of them it was, but I do distinctly remember sitting there and listening to and being so thrilled at hearing story after story. They told me this. They told me the story of Thinner, the novel Thinner, and just sort of summarized it very briefly, and that got etched in my brain. And then they also told me another story from Creepshow 2, which was the hitchhiker story, the "Thanks for the ride, lady" story. And I loved it so much. It was so exciting. So yeah. Anyway, so that's that. Okay, since we've just inaugurated her into the FOG staffers, we'll read the other submission that Asia Schwarzentuber gave to us aside from Rosemary's Baby, which she had also submitted. So this was the other thing that she'd mentioned. She said, "I think the answer to the broader question of what scares me is twofold. A, what I can't see or control, and B, how does it affect me? The more specific answer in terms of film is The Babadook, because that film answers both questions in the most visually and sensually disturbing ways. As a child, dark windows, closets, and shadows always just upset me because my imagination could paint anything on the blackness. The Babadook upset me in some really visceral ways because it hit every nerve of everything the child in me already felt insecure about. And it goes so far as to answer the all-consuming question when you are afraid, how do I get rid of this? My childhood aversion to anything body distortion or possession related is also triggered severely in this movie in the moment when the Babadook inhabits the mother. And because the Babadook so seamlessly melts into darkness and can appear to be one with just about any object in any place, any time, there's no escaping him. He really follows you home. You seemingly cannot control him, A, and B, he will affect you in the most mentally and physically violating ways possible. Slasher movies don't really scare me. Home invasion movies don't scare me. Demons and forces not of this world scare me. P.S. Even though The Babadook scared me the most, my favorite horror film is Rosemary's Baby, which I would shriek with delight if you guys covered at some point. Little did she know at that point that not only would we cover Rosemary's Baby, but that she would be a part of the conversation. So, yeah, here we go. That was Asia's unpacking, I think, very astutely of The Babadook. So, this has been fun. Oh, no. Still remember making you watch that movie so late at night. And
I loved it.
It
was great.
It was fantastic. So yeah, those were just a handful of some of the other smattering submissions that we've received on what scares us. We will be, after a brief and very fun intermission, entering into the what saves us camp, but more on that will come a little bit later. Just be patient, listeners. Just hang tight. But today, we are entering into this Ryan Reynolds starring. I've got to look up the name of the director again. Directed by Rodrigo Cortes. This very, very heavy but pretty inventive little claustrophobic nightmare called Buried. This was also submitted to us, as I'd mentioned earlier, by Ernst Mantler. And he was gracious enough as we asked if he wanted to submit a recording, and he did. So we're going to refresh our respective drinks and then let him explain to us why he chose this for us. So take it away, Ernst.
I'm still a relative newbie to scary movies, but one movie that helped definitively reveal a longtime fear of confined spaces and having a lack of control is the movie Buried with Ryan Reynolds. It may not be an overall amazing movie, and honestly, I don't even know what possessed me to watch it in the first place, outside of it being starred by a Canadian, as I always knew that I was uncomfortable with a lack of personal space. But this movie helped me put a name to my fear. And it also just scared the crap out of me, man.
Thank you very, very much for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can totally understand, especially having seen it. So I had seen this movie one time before. I'd watched it just because I have a soft spot in my heart. Well, for a lot of things apparently, because I feel like I say that a lot. But I have a soft spot in my heart.
That's just good. You gotta.
I've got a soft heart. I've got a tender heart. So, but I like films that one could maybe call them gimmicky, but in general they are inventive in their narrative dynamic. It's not a horror film, although definitely harrowing in some places. You remember that Tom Hardy film Lock?
Oh yeah.
Did you see that?
The driving. Yep.
Yeah, where the entire film is him in the car. And I thought that was a really fun is operative word, but I thought it was a really inventive and imaginative kind of film. So I had sought this out. This was several years prior to seeing Locke, but I had sought out Buried because I was intrigued by the premise. And so I was just curious. At that point, Ryan Reynolds was not the, Deadpool mega superstar he is now. He was known name, but I hadn't
at that point, he was just Green Lantern,
Had he done Green Lantern by then? I didn't look up the timing, but
I imagine so, but I don't have the dates in front of me.
Could be. This was 2010, and I can't remember when Green Lantern was, but I think you might be right. But I saw it, and there's so much about it that I just could not shake off, even though I'd only seen it once before. I'm very curious to know what you thought of the movie. I'm very curious to know, just in general, had you seen it before?
2011.
Oh, okay.
Green Lantern was 2011.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
I'm sure this is what got him the role.
Might have been, man. It is. I know I just asked you what you thought of it, but I mean, like it demands a lot of him. Like practically speaking and performance-wise, it demands an awful lot of him. And I feel like he really delivers in the role. But before we get into too many of those specifics, just what'd you think? How'd you respond to it in general?
I was about to say I dug it, but that felt like a poor choice of words.
Wow.
Oh, really? That's the brain train I just had.
It was way over my head. Wow.
Nope. I was being apologetic. You just threw it out to test the boundaries.
Sure.
No, I'm with you. I tend to appreciate something that at least experiments with the form. It's funny just reading some of those what scares us submissions and realizing how many movies I kind of haven't watched yet, because at this point I'm just saving for when the time comes that we get to them on the show, like In the Mouth of Madness, Cujo, etc. And I think this was kind of one of those, like, well, I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to get, which is Ryan Reynolds in a box, and definitely delivers on that. Now, I'm gonna give one strong dislike and one strong like, and then pivot. I've got a question for you.
Okay, sure.
The strong like, and it's real. I was very impressed with once it reveals why he's in there, because what's always challenging with a story like this is how do you narratively justify what is going on without it being just some absurd whatever.
Yeah.
And so once it was like, oh well, contracting work, just a blue collar kind of guy doing contracting work in the Middle East, but because he's American gets waylaid, and my understanding is thought dead, gets buried, but maybe they intended to bury him alive, I don't know. But nonetheless, the trappings of why he's where he is, I was like, yep, I'm down. I have what I need to buy into this story now. And that's kind of hard to come by sometimes.
Sure. Understood.
Maybe I don't know if you agree with that or not. Now,
I will respond in a moment.
So, one of the things I actively didn't love, and let me rephrase that. One of the things I actively disliked, and it's really one of the only things, but it's worth throwing in here so that we can get to the meatier stuff. For the movie does this thing about, gosh, as few as 3, as many as half a dozen times in its 90 minutes or less. For a movie that is all about the intimate and the claustrophobic, there are moments in this film where it wants you to believe it's a high octane action thriller with its editing and its score. I don't know if you felt that way in some moments. I was like, whoa, I get it. Like, whoa, like this is pump the brakes on the production a little bit. Like, let the actor and the concept do its work. And so do you know what I'm talking about when I say that? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's some moments where I feel like, well, let me describe what came to mind when you said that, is like when the sand starts pouring in and suddenly it's just like lots of fast cuts around inside the coffin, and then the music kind of swells. I mean, that's the first place my mind conjured, but maybe you have a more specific example.
Well, like 2 examples I wrote down. Well, how I wrote it was, I don't love some of the sensational cuts and scoring. It undercuts some of the severity in favor of action thriller energy. And the specific instances I wrote is when the Middle Eastern character on the phone yells, "Make video now," and there's this real loud escalating music.
I see.
And then another moment where the snake is present, the phone is ringing, the fingers coming off. It is really loud. Like, it's just a really loud score. Yeah. So moments like that where it's like, I'm observing this. I'm not stating this is the case.
Right.
It felt like an insecure maneuver. Anyway, regardless, the point is simply, I liked a whole lot about the movie. That was something that, because of its repetition, I felt compelled to sort of bring up. I do have a question, but I want to hear your thoughts to the
first part. So I don't disagree with anything you said. This, viewing it now with recent sort of heightened awareness and sensitivity of the ways cultures are portrayed on screen in fictitious storytelling, I actually don't, I'm feeling my way through my opinion on this. So I don't have a strong opinion on it, but I did actively wonder a couple of times, is the film somewhat problematic in the way it portrays, these Iraqi insurgents, that they would just bury this man alive? Because I do think that the narrative wants us to presume that they buried him alive, not that they just thought he was dead and buried him. But it's possible that was just an error, because he has that cell phone in there with him.
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true.
It feels like there was some intention to bury him alive. And I did wonder if there was this is gonna sound really random, but do you remember much about if anything, about the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Pit and the Pendulum? Do you remember much about anything about that? So I have not reread it in quite a minute, but if my memory of it serves, the whole reason it's somewhat similar to the concept of Buried, in that the main character of The Pit and the Pendulum awakens to find himself strapped to like a slab in a pit, and there's a swinging blade that keeps like escalating down, and that the reason he is there has something to do with the current political conflict in which he was engaged. But it's been so long since I've read the story, I can't stand 100% behind that, but that's what came to my mind. And I just wondered if there was some, because Ryan Reynolds' character in this is incredibly sympathetic in the fact that he is an American and an innocent in this conflict, is purely collateral damage. And with this, with this touch on some problematic notions, I don't even know for sure that it does, but well,
and in your defense,
a couple of times,
what I was saying is, at least the construct it gave me helped me understand why this character is even where he is. I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with the potential problematic nature of how we portray non-Americans, for sure.
Understood.
All right. Before we wade into too deep of waters, and perhaps we can introduce our new concept right after this, but I got a question for you, Reed. So,
okay, sure.
All right. Just this year, we did The Shallows. Blake Lively.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful people.
Right.
It's like, where I'm going here. Power couple. Couple.
Mm-hmm.
They each made. Yeah, sure. Yeah. They each made their own survival movie. One's in a box, one's with a shark.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to suggest another power couple. And Reed, that'd be you and I. Beautiful people. Power couple. Okay.
You are. I appreciate it.
Come on. This is no time for humility. Role play with me here. So Reed, I want to know if us as power couple, we were to be staring together at scripts, one of which that had us facing down a shark, one of which had us, but befriending Steven Seagal, I think was the name of the character there.
True. That's correct.
And the other one had us stuck in a box. Which one would you pick, Reed? I want to know what you like. What are you going to subject me to? What are you going to choose for yourself?
Wow.
Yeah. It's like the power couple paradox. It
really is. It really is. This is gonna.
Are you going for self-preservation? You going to throw me?
I am. I am. So
I guess we're not a very power couple after all.
So while it is terrifying to think about, utterly terrifying to think about, particularly given this movie and the difference in how The Shallows ends versus how Buried ends, I think I would go for the box. And the reason I think I would go for the box.
All right.
I think the reason I would go for the box is because I'm a very little guy, and that's not to imply that
I thought that
I remember several times as
More
I was watching this,
oxygen.
I was watching this several times. I was like, Ryan Reynolds is a muscular guy. He's probably about 6'2", 6'3", or something like that. I'm only 5'7" and very small, and I bet my oxygen would last longer, and I bet I might be able to maneuver into a corner, or maybe like, yeah.
You'd be just going
I'd be building Legos in the corner. I'd just be like, like, oh man,
that snake would just take up residence and you wouldn't even know it. You're like,
no,
he's got it's like a duplex in there.
Somebody is that an echo in here? Echo.
You're gonna last longer. Brenner's gonna get to the wrong place and realize he's at the wrong place. And
we still have hours.
Oh, okay. You've learned to slow your breathing down. You're not taking
That's right.
Small breaths or something.
No. I'll be fine.
You are a good man, Reed Lackey.
I'll be fine. So I'll take the box. Yeah, I'll take the box.
Good. Well, maybe I'll survive the shark. Probably not, but I will. Let's just say this: in terms of beautiful people, I have nothing on Blake Lively, and she will probably make it alive far more frequently than I will. But
it's a fair assessment.
That was a fun little game. I enjoyed that. Yeah. A little bit of a would you rather, if you will.
Sure. No, indeed. Okay, so I do want to. So before we get into this next part, because this next part is maybe kind of a little bit exciting. So we've both kind of addressed a couple of things. I want to hit it one more time just because the actor in me feels the need to sort of applaud and everything. Like, it's one thing for a movie to rest on an actor's shoulders in an ensemble piece or in a gimmicky piece or whatever like that. But this, if you don't care about Ryan Reynolds and the performance he's delivering, you don't care about this movie at all. I think the film itself, there might be a bit of sort of severity to the plight he's entering into, but I do want to applaud Ryan Reynolds' acting here, because I feel like, I don't know that this is true, but I feel like he is somebody who is not often regarded for his capacity and talent as an actor, because he is so attractive looking. He's that, sort of classical leading man type. And so I feel like he does not often, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like he does not often get kudos for just skillfully executing something he is, and he doesn't, I'll even go so far as to say he doesn't always do this good of a job. There have been a couple of other things where I felt like he was maybe a bit too over the top, maybe hitting the notes of comedy a bit too strong, but I feel like this is a really lived in kind of performance, and I feel like he really does invest you as a viewer beyond just the circumstances in which he's placed. So before we move on into this next little segment, I just wanted to throw some specific love the way of Ryan Reynolds for his performance in this film, because it demands a tremendous amount for him. One trivial bit that I wrote down is the moment that they filmed where, spoiler alert for the end of this film, he does not make it out of the box. The film ends and he is actually buried alive and will die. When the sand has fully made it all the way up, I read a trivial bit that was basically real.
Yeah.
And that they had paramedics on site to quickly, once they got the shot, quickly sort of recover and make sure that he himself was okay. But I'm like, whew, this role demanded a lot of him, and I feel like he delivered pretty well in that spectrum. So anyway, before we move on into the next part, I had to just throw that out there. So do you want to set up what comes next, or do you want me to?
You do it.
Okay. So I teased earlier that we have some fantastic listeners, and we do, and we love you all, and we mean that when we say that. But we introduced this segment a couple of weeks ago with Steve Beckley on the Event Horizon conversation. I believe was the first place that we.
Was that the first sing-songy?
I believe that was the first sing-songy thing. We introduced. He will. And we introduced this little, this moment of that ain't right. A new sort of formal segment. But then we had a listener just reach out to us and just had gift wrapped a little delight for us, because we're often talking about these little sing-songy things. And we had a listener by the name of Andrew Nelson who decided that he would just say, "Hey, y'all, check this out. What do you think?" And wrote us a tune for That Ain't Right. Wrote us a legit, and it's been stuck in my head ever since he sent it. So so you're hearing it here first, listeners, but Andrew, we really appreciated this. This is so much fun. Thank you so much. And so we're going to enter into the That Ain't Right segment with a legit jingle, with a straight up
the That Ain't Right jingle.
Climbing up the pop charts. So
take it away, Andrew.
That ain't right, it ain't right, nothing right about it, no, it ain't right, no, it ain't right, no, that ain't right, it ain't right, it sure as hell ain't right, it sure as hell ain't right.
That ain't right, that ain't right, that sure as hell ain't right.
That's amazing. Thank you so much,
So
Andrew
awesome.
Nelson, for so amazing a tune. So yes, it is time once more, Reed Lackey, to find all the things that aren't just wrong. They ain't right.
They ain't right. It ain't just wrong. It ain't right.
Real time slogan. So yes, this is the part of the show where we list our top 3 that ain't right moments from a given film. This time around, Buried, featuring Ryan Reynolds in a box. So
you want to go first?
I'll go first.
We're going top to bottom. Your worst to not as worst.
Okay. Well, the worst. Now you threw me because I was ready for I wasn't thinking about the worst, but I've got two chances at this, so we'll see.
Okay.
The worst that ain't right. I mean, if you were to pick a that ain't right, if this movie turns on this scene.
I think I know exactly where you're going, and it's my number 1 as well.
It's
it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's
I
not.
just mean the movie turns on that scene. Like, in other words,
yeah, sure.
I had no reason to necessarily think he will not survive.
Yeah.
And then the end, and you're like, okay. Well, turns out his wife won this bet. I get the shark movie, and I'm getting out alive.
Yeah.
But
God,
the degree of that ain't right attached to how that ends, like, it almost feels too lighthearted to call it that ain't right, because when it happens, you're like, oh, ooh,
yes. Yeah.
Ooh, we just dug deeper into the pit.
Yeah. For listeners who have not seen this, so throughout the course of the movie, he has a cell phone in with him, and a couple of times has contacted some FBI agents, and these FBI agents are searching for him. They are actively searching for him. At least that's what they tell him. And towards in the last 10 minutes of the film, when kind of all seems lost, and the top of the box has kind of broken in a little bit, and some sand is starting to fill the coffin, and he's pretty much resigned himself to the fact of he's not going to make it out of this. He's even recorded a little last will and testament video that he uploaded. So he's not making it out of this. Suddenly he gets on the phone again with the FBI agent, who's like, hey, we got a lead on you, and we are almost there. Like, we are literally like almost there. And so they found a lead on him. They are coming. They are going to get him out. And then he even has like a brief phone call where he's been trying the whole movie to connect with his wife. He finally connects with his wife, and he's like, they're coming to get me. They're coming to get me. Like, we're coming. And then they literally, when the FBI agent gets back on the phone with him, he's like, 3 more minutes. Just hold on for 3 more. Excuse me. Just hold on for 3 more minutes. I'm talking about it. Sure. Just hold on for 3 more minutes. Just 3 more minutes. And then suddenly they open, and he's like, are you here? Are you here? And suddenly they open it up, and you hear the FBI agent's voice sort of fall. And it's like, oh my God, no. They led us to Mark White's body, which Mark White was another character that was referenced earlier, but they led us to Mark White's body. And then when he said that, he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then the sand fills up. He is going to die. And then the last words you hear in the film are, I'm so sorry, Paul. And that's the ending of the film. And I get it. It's on my list. I didn't put it number 1. I'll tell you mine in just a second, but that's on my list. That ain't right. That so ain't right. It just rips your heart out.
Well, what's yours?
Rivaling that moment, which, God, that is an awful moment. is the phone call where he is terminated from his job, and they rip away his insurance,
his life insurance.
And so the premise of this film is he is a truck driver for like a transportation company, obviously.
Yeah, it's a contractor, yeah.
And he's a contractor who is operating in Iraq, and some insurgents had basically, he stumbled upon an IED and something else. There were some other sort of factors that sort of led to them taking him and throwing him in this box and burying him alive. And then he tries to reach out to several different people, but one of the people he tries to connect with is his employer. And when he finally gets a call back from somebody in the HR of his employer, who then begins to record the conversation and notify him that they found evidence that he had been fraternizing with an employee, and that because he had been fraternizing with an employee, they've terminated his employment. And since they terminated effective that morning, exactly. So that because they terminated him that morning, and everything that happened to him was after he was terminated, he was not an employee of CRT anymore, and therefore his family was not eligible for the insurance. And that was
Nathan,
that ain't right. That ain't right. And if there is anything in this movie that is worse than the absolute ending, it is that right there. That
is it though, because the end is not right.
The end ain't right.
It's not wrong. It ain't right. Him being retroactively let go from his employer, so that the corporate capitalist pigs don't have to pay out to his family for his pain and their pain and suffering.
Yes,
that isn't just wrong. It ain't right. But Reed, I mean,
Nathan,
are there many things more ain't right than, as Woody the sheriff might say, there's a snake in my pants.
There's a snake in my pants. There's a snake in my pants. When that started happening, I was like, you're
my favorite deputy. Yeah.
Somebody's poisoned the water hole.
Oh, I get it. There's a snake in my pants. I've got questions. My man just woke up with a snake in his pants. This is not a euphemism. It was
no, it was slithering.
A snake. Did it? I mean,
oh my god!
Like, come on. There is. Remember how I said 10 minutes ago? Hey, you know what? This movie constructed a narrative that helps me buy into why I'm watching what I'm watching.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't know how, if I can buy that you fell asleep or you passed out or what. Now, I guess if you're unconscious, maybe. But like, what? The snake in your pants.
Well, the snake didn't start out in his pants.
Right. And did it go up one leg and around and down out the other? That's a whole level of that ain't right. Because it exits the pant leg head first. So either it went up the same pant leg and turned around in the same there is no version of this story that would qualify as something resembling right.
No, it is just it took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. It absolutely did. Like, it was just and the freaking, like, presumably he is completely buried. So like, did the snake like crawl through the dirt?
It's a sand snake. Yeah, sure, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's a hole in the coffin. At first
yes, I know that. I saw that. So I knew that the impression is that the snake, like, oh, well, then it's going to slither. But you just said very confidently, oh, it's a sand snake, isn't it? But I was just like, that was one of my first questions is I was like, how did this snake get into, like, did it just crawling around through the dirt? I thought snakes crawled on the dirt. I didn't know that they crawled like down deep in the buried, like, because they're not worms. I mean, like, they breathe.
No, they're snakes.
Right.
But I mean, that snake, speaking of not my story, not your story, like, that snake, he just in the cool of the sand, it's hot up on that surface of the sand.
Yeah.
So he's like, oof, this is a new den. I'm gonna go
in
here.
Minute.
So it goes in the box.
Cool.
And then he's like, wait a minute.
It's furnished.
Here's a cabinet. It's furnished. He's like, wait a minute. Sees a pant leg, thinks it's a new cavern he can slither up into. And then he's like, wait a minute. Oh my God, it's already occupied.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't realize. Please excuse me while I.
Oh, the way I came. I'll let myself out.
I'll let myself out. Just don't mind me. Don't mind me. I'm sorry.
There's only room for one. And so he leaves. And then my man's just trying to go. And Ryan Reynolds is like, I'm going to torch you. Come on.
Yeah. Oh my
Come on,
gosh. He lit
freaking. Oh my God, that's funny.
Lit freaking flask alcohol on fire in the middle of this.
What are you doing?
Like this is gonna go well for you. Like
no.
You
got real lucky there.
No kidding.
That's a lucky man.
That poor snake's like, dang man, these occupants are hostile. Like, I
can't get quality accommodations up in here.
God, I was just wanted to borrow some sugar. Okay, just like I didn't need all this. I'll be on my way. Okay, I'll be on my way.
Mind me.
Fine then.
Oh yes, that ain't right.
That
ain't right. Andrew, take us out.
That sure as hell ain't right.
Oh man, that's funny.
Man said it's occupied. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. That is
all right. That was awesome.
Wow.
That's right. We got us a new jingle, Reed. This
is exciting. So don't expect that jingle to go anywhere anytime soon. That was that is entrenched. It lodged itself into my brain, so it lodged itself onto our pod.
Ooh, that's funny.
Okay, so we've kind of tap danced around it,
slithered around the box.
But this is, I mean, it's a harrowing and pretty heavy film. Now, I'm going to ask, this is not sort of my formal question. I don't even know if we'll get to my more formal question, but like, I began to pick up through the course of this. Do you think there's a metaphor here? And if the metaphor, I'm about to posit what I found as a metaphor.
Okay.
And so my question to you is, do you think this is a metaphor the film is intentionally trying for? And if you think it might be, how well do you think the metaphor works?
And this is not the formal question.
No, it's not. It's not. It's just off the cuff, actually.
Okay.
Is because I was picking up on this metaphor of, obviously the film is called Buried, and he is literally buried in a coffin.
Mm-hmm.
But he is also metaphorically buried under the gravity and the weight of a bunch of implied and directly stated circumstances. He is, somewhat financially dependent to the degree that, like, he has to take a job like this. He has $70 in his savings account. He says that a little bit later. And then also through the course of the film, the machinations that are required to get him to get him any help, to get him any understanding, like there's just this ton of stuff that keeps piling on. Bureaucracy, political unrest. He talks at one point, like, directly confronts the FBI agent over the phone about, like, if I was some diplomat, like, I'd be out of here in like 5 minutes, but I'm nobody, so you can take your time. And so my question to you is genuinely, like, do you think that they were also trying to imply this sense of being buried under the weight of all this political and bureaucratic constructs that he also comes up against in his fight to get free of this coffin? So A, do you think that is a metaphor they were going for intentionally? And B, if, whether or not they were, do you think that's something that works pretty well in the film? Or basically, how do you respond to something like that?
I mean, basically what you said is this a thoughtful filmmaker or not. I
You could have
mean,
cut out at least 45 of your words, Reed, and just basically
does it work as metaphor? Like, well, I mean, metaphor is in the eye of the beholder, Reed. Some things mean nothing, but everything can mean something. I don't know. I mean, I sure, I think it's fair to both apply, it's absolutely fair to apply a literal meaning and perhaps a figurative one. I also know, just from a script construct standpoint, you need a reason this person keeps getting deflected, so obstacles have to be put in his path, and if we want to say those are metaphorical items that bury you, sure.
Layers upon what,
Can I can I redirect what is, I'm going to use your metaphor and raise you maybe serious? I don't know. Because, and this is a bit of a half-formed thought, even though I've written some things down. So we may have never, and good Lord, hopefully never will be in any approximate scenario as poor Paul here.
Yeah, I hope not. Right.
But I'm curious ways we connect to his experience and how I want to sort of, when you do dig under the surface, as we try to do here, and maybe I am importing to weighty a gravity, but maybe not, because I don't totally know how to put what I'm feeling to specific words. But there's a weird way that in reflecting on Buried, it did make me feel a little bit of something about the era we're living in, specifically from the standpoint of the need for human touch and contact, and how what happens now here's a metaphor as well. You have this person who is literally isolated, whose only means of communication is a screen, who every person he reaches out to is either an obstacle, actively disbelieves him. There's a lack of integrity of communication, which is a phrase I just came up with. Like he is in dire straits, he is in a desperate scenario, and everyone he's reaching out to deflects, rejects in the person of the personnel guy, the work thing, or disbelieves, or actively wills his harm, until he is literally buried. And I don't know about you in your life. I told my wife the other night, I was like, I am so tired of looking at my phone. And yes, I do that for quote unquote leisure. Leisure implies intentionality and relaxation. I don't know that that's the case, but I do it for non-work related reasons. But I'm on it a lot for work too. I whether it's GPS usage or we have a CRM system that's an app on my phone. So point being, I'm just on it a lot, and I start to notice, I'm like, man, I am so sick of staring at this thing.
Yeah.
And yet here it is. And I'm kind of fortunate, as like my work permits me a decent amount of human to human kind of contact. I'll frame it to you this way. Today, I met with this person it was ostensibly a sales scenario, me to this homeowner. And I was like, after this 2-hour time, I was like, this is why I enjoy doing what I do. This pair of women, it's a gay couple, and I just learned about their life and the 3 years they spent in an RV and the 3 years they spent in Ohio, and how they own this home that was built in the 40s here in Charlotte, and just they've moved back into it and are trying to upgrade it now. And so I just came away really refreshed and like,
Right.
what a lovely, who knows if it'll turn into a transaction, but that's kind of not the point, and or
Sure.
kind of is the point, which is how much of our life, when it is in isolation and mediated solely through device, becomes transactional. Like he is literally looking for a transaction. I need to buy my life out of here, whatever,
right, of course.
whether that's currency related or not, whatever.
Sure. Right.
He's willing to make this ransom tape or whatever they call it. I don't remember the phrasing for it, but this tape, solely to get out. And so the point I'm driving at is simply, when literally starved or even metaphorically starved of connection, of contact, of human touch, of human interaction, what that can do to us in a figurative that turns into a literal sense.
Right.
We become, we run out of oxygen.
Oh, wow. Right.
And how much, and I'm actually not pointing any sort of particular finger at the quote unquote system or this or that, the military, America, that, I'm not even saying that. I'm simply saying the desperate need we have for connection and intimacy and truthfulness of contact, non-transactional connection. I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm running with in terms of how I connected to Buried.
Yeah, and I feel like so that is one thing that I think in a general sense, I think the film's construct does work in perhaps several metaphorical ways, because I think everything that you just said, I mean, it's there present in the film. Yes, there are very practical, perhaps superficial is the right word, life and death stakes to his plight.
Life and death snakes.
Wow. Yes. To the plight that he has to overcome. That's very real, but also his sense of coming to terms with what brought him here. Like all of the different factors that put him into this position that now he literally can't get out of on his own. And I think I struggle a lot with the whole what is transactional and what is not, because it is really easy, I think, to view relational things as transactional because of how much give and take they require. Like, I think, I guess I would pivot back to this because let's sit on this for a second about this transactional idea. Is the question I'm leading with, and then I'll sort of unpack some of my thoughts, is what defines transactional? What makes it merely transactional? Because one of the things that I'm thinking about is I'm like, well, things that are relational in nature still involve a certain give and take, and they still involve a certain perhaps unspoken set of rules of engagement that should not be violated if you want the relationship to continue in health and fullness. You don't betray each other's trusts. You don't act in abusive and denigrating ways. And so I guess I'm taking what you're saying and saying, like, yeah, you run out of oxygen, you get yourself positioned in this place that is merely transactional. And I guess I'm wondering where the line of demarcation is there that says, like, okay, well, now suddenly you've crossed over into something that is no longer buoyed by relational substance and is merely transactional. And how do we get there? How do we find ourselves in that state, and what defines that when it's reached that point? Do you want me to explore a little bit, or does my question make sense?
No, I think that sort of makes sense. And I'll answer with a story.
Oh, okay. I love story time.
So, so my wife and I aren't really watching anything together these days. Not intentionally so, just life is extremely full. in a lot of different directions. And so the thought of, because it's usually her deferring to me of, oh, well, what do you have an interest in, Nathan? I'll sort of partner with you in that, and maybe I'll, enjoy it ultimately.
Right.
And
right.
And it sounds like I'm not, maybe it sounds like I'm not answering your question, but the other night, our kids are out of town for the week. So the house is particularly quiet in a way it hasn't been in a while. And it was like, I don't know, 8 p.m. And we sat down. And I was like, do you want to watch anything? And she's like, well, this is the song and dance we play out. Is there something you're interested in? I was like, well, I mean, nothing like urgent or pressing or that I know you would enjoy. And so everything feels like a jumping off a cliff, as it were. And so I would say there's a moment there that was a little bit transactional, like, okay, well, I don't want that.
Sure.
And so this really cool thing happened. And maybe a note for all the married folk out there, definitely was a learning moment for me, was we just started chatting. And it wasn't about the calendar. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about kids. It wasn't about TV. We've got some pressing medical related things going on around us. It wasn't about any of that. It was just, how are you feeling about X, or what's going on in your heart, in your spirit, in your mind. And I guess that's what I would sort of say to you. And when I say the metaphor of Paul in the box here is, there's no one to join him.
Yeah.
Or no one he can join, it stands to reason no one would want to join him, but it also, a joining should happen for this, using this language, for this to no longer be transactional, a joining of him to someone else in a less state of despair or direness, or someone joining him saying, I am here with you in this hell, And so I guess that's, to me, when I think, what is the difference between transactional and perhaps we can use the word transformational? It's when there isn't a thing attempting to be bartered. There's just a thing attempting to be lived alongside. Like, in my scenario at home, it's, there's a little bit of bartering when we're talking about my wife trading her time for a show or whatever that I'm not positive.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Versus, we'll just start talking. That is engagement and connection and relational in the sense that I would sort of describe it. I don't know if that addresses what you're asking.
It does. In fact, I'll reciprocate with a similar story that, there is a relationship in my life, in my family specifically, that used to be, or at least I used to consider it, somewhat substantive, and time and unfortunately some cultural shifts and some differences of opinion about a multitude of different things have positioned that relationship to be awkward and a bit more stilted in this recent year. And I'm talking about something, in my life. And I can remember intoning to someone that I was uncertain how we would have a conversation after this. And my wife, lovingly and honestly, was saying, well, you'll just have a superficial conversation. And she had to point that out to me a couple of different times, where she said, no, you'll just have a superficial conversation. And I finally, and this is what your story brought to mind, I finally turned to her and I said, I think that's my point, is I don't consider it a conversation if it is superficial. I consider it an exchange. It's an exchange of dialogue. It is a give and take of the moment to pass through things. But in my, yes.
Well, and almost, if I can put a fine point on that, if we're trying to figure out the transaction that's happening there, you're buying each other's silence.
Basically, yes. Yes.
You're saying, I'm willing to trade you these soft, shallow words for you to do the same. Correct. because the human part feels a bit buried.
Yes. No, absolutely. And would require some work to dig out and expose, and might require, and Listen, I get it. There are times, that they'll tell you in relationship counseling or relationship books will often tell you like one of the worst things that can happen to specifically a marital relationship, but I think it's true probably of any relationship, is when you are not willing to fight anymore. Like when, no, it's not good and it's toxic when all you do is fight. Absolutely, that should be a big red flag, and you should get that worked on in terms of just basic communication skills. But if you reach the point to where you're like, I am tired of fighting, so rather than talking or engaging at all, I am going to just not bring up the things that will cause a fight. And that's where things get super, very shallow and incredibly superficial, where it's just like, yeah, no, we're just not going to talk anymore. And that's kind of the death rattle for a relationship. Again, it's usually in the context of marriage, but I think would apply to any sort of intimate familial relationship that you have, is just like, yeah, once you've reached that point to where you're like, I just don't want to fight about this. So because I don't want to fight about this, then, and I also should throw a lantern on the fact of like, that may be true of a subject that just proves consistently volatile. And it might be wise at that point to sort of, maybe that subject is not somewhere we can healthily go in a moment. But when that just becomes the condition of the relationship, then yeah, everything gets very plastic and everything gets very surfacey, and who you really are is trapped under, again, leaning on the metaphor of the movie, but it's trapped under layers and layers and layers and layers of things that you do not have the ability to break through them. You don't have the leverage to break through them. You're running, it's choking out any possibility of that ever breaking free. And I do think there's a way that it's easy for us on this podcast that gets published on Apple Podcasts, to rail against the devices and to rail against the ways in which specifically social media, but I think just technology and digital space in general has caused us to have to redefine how we fit in with physical, tangible spaces, and I think that's...
Can I throw at you? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
What I heard there, so this may not have been what you're saying, is, hey, we're using the same mechanisms. I do think it matters. A difference matters when you and I are overcoming a limitation, which is a literal, physical space can't be occupied on a regular basis.
Sure. Right. Yes, of course.
At least endeavor to have transformational human contact.
That's a good point.
That can sort of be listened in on, which happens to be the podcast format. So to me, there is something different than exercising a tool in service of humanness. And to be frank, as someone who even does this occasionally still, predominantly in the social media digital space, is usually just is not intending transformational humanness. It is intending transactional one-upmanship. And yeah, that I agree totally in that space. That's like, No,
I think that's a fair pushback. So I'm not going to share which listener said this. They will know it when they they will know it when they hear it. But a listener that reached out specifically to me not that long ago shared something that I found very humbling and that I share in this moment with affection. It's probably going to sound for a second a bit self-aggrandizing. I do not intend it to.
Oh boy,
it was
a whole lot of.
I know there's all these different layers to try to break through. So let me just say what was said. A listener reached out, again, for the sake of their confidence, in case they wouldn't want it known. I won't say who it was, but know that I would give you a shout out if you would want one. Is basically they reached out and they said, no, in listening to you and Nathan, your conversations feel safe. And I thought they weren't saying they feel safe as in y'all aren't willing to challenge each other, but just that you and I, in the relationship that we've cultivated over a couple of decades, that we are safe to challenge each other. We are safe to sort of, fool around in terms of like we can be silly and we can be serious. And
we're a power couple.
We're a power
Occupied.
couple. No, but what they were what they were expressing was, and specifically in the sense that they felt at least confident enough to reach out because of hearing our
Sure.
relational engagement. So they felt like maybe these will be safe people to reach out and perhaps be a bit vulnerable. Again, I don't want that to come off self-aggrandizing. I was very humbled by the compliment. It is something that we strive for. I feel like you and I, just as people, strive for this, to be people that want to cherish real and substantive conversations, not not connections that are purely, oh, good, go measure the clicks or go whatever. Like, no, but to cultivate, like, hey, if we are,
I have no idea what that was a reference to, but
just like
clicks as in web surfing. Okay, I see what
web
you're saying.
surfing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, measure the what? Huh?
It's like, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody about the show just to get numbers on the show. And I say that in full sincerity. I don't think whenever I've said, hey, check our show out, believe me or not, listener, I don't think I have ever shared it with somebody to be like, oh, great, they'll start listening. And that's one more person going to start listening.
It's funny you say that. So my brother, who was on with us on Cobra Kai, he and I were chatting recently. And again, if you recall from that conversation, if you listen to it, my brother is in pastoral ministry in rural Georgia. You know, I am progressive by most middle of the road Christian standards. He might be a little progressive by rural Georgia standards. But nonetheless, he was telling me about this younger guy, and, you know, I'm 41, he's 43. So younger is a bit relative, probably mid-20s ish, about this young guy in the church that's just kind of quirky and really into like genre stuff and horror movies, and how he was trying to, you know, just kind of have some connection with this guy. And I was like, did you tell him about the show? And he was like, I didn't even think about that. I should have done that. Like, yeah, you should have done that. Like, we're his people. He is looking for people, and he needs people, and he can't find them where he's at. And tell him, come on over.
And here we are. And the water's fine. You know,
like, yes, exactly. It may be red and murky, and there's something swimming around under it, but it's fine. Come on in.
That's true.
But to your point, yes, it's like, you know, the people who are going to be appealed to by us it's a niche. We've got to.
But I think, and to get it back in, because it's like, you know, to bring it out of the navel gazing and to actually, like, because the reason that I bring something like that up and to connect all of these, you know, these tissues of things that we're trying to sort of dance with is, you know, what we do here and how I want to live my life is about cultivating community. Mm-hmm. And that became very important to me to operate perhaps digitally when the global pandemic sort of sent us all to our homes, you know, and you do crave the ability, you know, things are getting a little bit easier now. We have been able in recent weeks to sort of get together with one or two couples who, you know, just, I mean, for what this is worth, you know, my family is vaccinated, and we got together with a couple of other vaccinated people. And so that felt really nice to just be in the same space. You know, we felt safe, and that was just our construct.
Sure.
But it has become more and more important to me at this phase that I am in life, whether that be through technology, which you and I are certainly using technology right this very minute, and inviting in a very sort of odd, absurdist way, inviting other people to listen in on this conversation, and also inviting, like, hey, this is about cultivating a community of connection, of you know, just some dots on the spectrum that we might be able to say, like, hey, you know, I relate to that, or I can understand that.
Sure.
Or that's an entry point where now suddenly I maybe feel seen, maybe feel heard, or maybe can be seen or heard, etc. And that is something that, you know, I find really vital in the time that we're living in, to be able to make that substantive, because I have real flesh and blood relationships in my life where these people don't know me. And I'm not trying to make this like a big therapy session, but I have expressed this to you, my friend, and to other friends with whom I felt safe enough to open this up to, that there are people in my life who, time served, have known me significantly longer than some of the friends I have in my life. And yet the friends who may have only known me for a few years know me with significantly greater intimacy than these people who have just shared the same space of my life. And a lot of the difference is the ability to have a good conversation, the ability to see and know one another with substance. And yes, getting back to the film, he was put here through completely circumstantial issues. And I don't know, I honest to God don't know if I get the impression from the film that his termination from CRT was a complete fabrication. That may or may not be true. Like, I think you could read that moment as, yes, he really was. What I mean is they accuse him of having an affair with another coworker. That's what they, in so many words, accuse it.
Yes.
I don't think
created a paper trail. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think the film definitively answers whether he's guilty of that or not. I think it's at least a little bit ambiguous. I think it's perfectly valid to read it and say, like, yeah, he had an affair and they caught him, and so this is a problem. But he never owns up to it in the thing. While he's on it, he's like, we're just friends. We're just friends. So I honestly don't know how far that relationship went. So it could be a fabrication that the company leaned onto to get out of paying the insurance claim, or it could be that it was a legitimate thing. Yeah, that's yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, but where I'm going with all of that is even something like that is commodified in the circumstances that he's in. That maybe all he shared, and this is what I want, this is my interpretation of the film, that maybe all he shared was this was a coworker who happened to be female with which he shared perhaps a fully platonic but friendly, interaction and camaraderie. And because I certainly get the impression that he genuinely loves his wife. There's nothing in the film to lead me to believe that he doesn't genuinely love his wife. And that gets commodified by this company for whom he works. And it gets, treated for its transactional leverage. And that's the way it gets sort of positioned inside the film. And so I think while this does not necessarily seem like the obvious place to go for a film like this, I do feel like there's a lot to think about in terms of the way we get buried under layers of life, layers of systems, layers of technology, layers of hurts and wounds that we didn't share or that we haven't resolved and we haven't addressed. And then suddenly we just get positioned too far underneath all of those things where we get a bit desperate to reach out for connection, but have lost the reach to really even get to somebody. We can't even do anything about it. Anyway, that's
well, I mean, I feel like you're articulating, kind of exactly what was sort of speaking out to me there, is that when, and there's maybe a place to go here, however far or not, but like, he has nothing left to transact. There's nothing, he is literally not worth anything.
Yes. Right.
To those that he interacts with in this film.
Right.
It's whether you want to be as reductive as corporate enterprise, a government entity. Surely I imagine that we're not meant to believe the wife doesn't want him home. I don't mean to imply that. I just mean,
no, of course. Yeah.
Those who might be able to help him because all they've viewed him as, whether as just a cog in their corporate machine or as an invisible, nondescript citizen out in the world doing what producers do.
Yeah, of course.
Producers, I mean economically.
Yeah,
these are enterprises that have not seen them, and so that's what I simply mean by we have to find ways. We have to. It's hard as hell, man. It is hard to not put on the lenses of transaction. Like, what can this person, what can this situation, what can this experience do for me?
Right, of course.
That is a very difficult, because everything around us screams that because quote unquote everyone's doing it, that is an okay method of operating in the world, when all it does is leaves us isolated. It leaves us alone. It leaves us unconnected, untethered, maybe dead. Another little story here. I shared this with you, but it's worth and relevant here. I had a real little mini crisis recently of kind of spirit, where this will surprise no one, but during the election season, we had a Biden-Harris sign in our yard, and in a previous era, that would have just been seen as like, oh yeah, you voted for that person. Like it's
You're in
not
that camp, right?
Yeah, it didn't 10 years ago didn't mean like what we've assigned these things these days.
Yeah.
But a few instances with immediate neighbors in the recent weeks and months, just, I don't know. I became very self-conscious of how even something that I would consider so banal as that sign do to affect, in this instance, my kids' social interactions with peers in their neighborhood. And so really sent me in this kind of internal, just, you know, place, this buried place internally where I was like, man, are we, because, you know, Charlotte's a very metropolitan city, but there's a lot of rural areas. We occupy or live in a semi-rural area, you know, like we are going to be the more left-leaning folk around us, and just started feeling alone, started feeling isolated and alone, honestly. And worried about how those actions may be imperceptibly affecting your kids, kind of thing. Yeah. And literally, dude, we'd gone to get Chick-fil-A. I'd brought it home. It was me and my wife and mother-in-law. And for some reason the kids, they were maybe at my parents or something. You'll love this. I was mad because there wasn't the fries I ordered in the bag. When I got the bag in the house, I was like, what the dead gummit?
I'm driving back there right now.
I literally went out to the car to look for the receipt that I knew was in the car. While I'm in the car, or while I'm walking to the car, this family walks up my driveway, like mom and dad, 3 kids. And they're like, hey, one of your kids goes to one of our kids' schools. We just noticed her at the bus stop, kind of thing.
Right.
We wanted to come say hello. And they live like a street over. And I don't know how long it's been, Reed, since you've met new people. It had felt like it's been quite a while based on how my heart responded to this experience.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
You're meeting this new family, and in your own mind, you're not judging. I don't mean that, but as in you're just assessing everything. Like, are they like, do they like me? Check yes or no.
Right. You know? Yeah.
But this really lovely kind of time happened. Our kids weren't even there, but my wife came out and we introduced ourselves to this family who'd walked up to meet us by way of these school interactions. And we just hung out in the front yard for about an hour. Our youngest was here. That was it. So the 4-year-old was here. So she was playing with their kids in the front yard. And we just, you know, we learned have similar sort of geographical backgrounds, kind of thing. And just a few intersections that were really unique and kind of like, that's cool that we share that.
Right.
And yes, I did that thing where after we spent that hour together, I looked them up. I'm like, please God, let him. I don't need like lockstep simpatico worldview. I just need something that's a little more close to my train.
Yes,
and sure enough, like I looked up the wife's and it had a Black Lives Matter thing on her face. Like, yeah. I screenshotted it and sent it to my wife, and she's like, I think I'm gonna cry. And I'm like, I know. But point being, this need we have, ignore all the particularities of the politics of what I just said, because the point of the story is simply this need we have for just solidarity of humanness, and like this thing that is endemic to what it means to be alive, what it means to be, I think, faithful, what it means to be human, to just see in another person community and communion and fellowship, and be like, wow, I could share some life with this person and it not be rejected or refused or deflected or disbelieved, even, you know, which is what Paul encounters at every turn in this film. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense or feels contextual.
No, it makes tremendous sense. And honestly, well, it's funny. I just want to yes and amen the feeling, the sensibility that you described there. And I want to share what it rose up in me, though what it rose up in me might pivot for a moment a bit more like not sermonizing, but distinctly more of a general sense of spirituality. So if I can share something there, as you were talking, and the sort of this outcry of the heart to receive connection, this outcry of the heart, to be seen and be known. And I don't know what it makes me. I don't know what made me think this, but I just very quickly typed in to look up Isaiah 40 so that I could read it, because this is. So I'm going to read a passage of scripture, and then I'm going to unpack what it made me think of in context for this. And I will sort of launch pad off of this. We've been talking about this film Buried, where this man gets buried alive. There's tons of layers. He's desperately reaching out for somebody to find him, see him, free him, and then, keeps getting barricaded at every turn. I'm not asking this question, but one of the questions that I was going to intend, to possibly bring up is, what value does sorry hold when you can't do anything about it? Because so many people say to Paul in this film, I'm sorry, Paul, but what value really does saying I'm sorry hold? But one of the things that, when you were talking about, finding this connection with some neighbors and sort of like, oh, maybe there's something maybe I won't be rejected here. Maybe I'll be received.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be well. And this passage in Isaiah that I'm about to read stood out to me. And there's work. I have said this before. I think I've said it on the show. I've definitely said it on Facebook. But it is becoming more important to me, where I've identified where I've said, like, I think some people are always in their faith trying to keep people out, and some people are always trying to find ways to let people in. And I feel like that's just sort of, in general, the camps that sort of break down in theological and spiritual and relational thought. Some people are always looking for ways to build walls, and maybe other people are looking for ways to build bridges, to quote Chadwick Boseman in Black Panther.
You Bombay.
But I'm going to read this passage of scripture, and then hopefully share my thoughts without too much emotion, and hopefully with a lot of clarity. So Isaiah 40, beginning at the first verse, it says, comfort my people, says your God.
Yes.
Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, and that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, which is, I'm going to pause the scripture reading for a second. This is invoked also in the Gospel of John, referring to John the Baptist. But verse 3 of Isaiah 40, a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And what is pinging in me very specifically, and why I'm reading this, prepare the way for the Lord, and make straight in the desert a highway for our God. There's work that we can, and again, I'm talking in spiritual context, but I think it works in my heart and imagination as well in relational context. Like, the work to clear the path is what I'm talking about. Like, the work to dig away the dirt, the work to dig away the layers and make, and the scriptural visual reference is every valley raised up, every mountain and hill brought low, the ground shall be made level, the rugged places suddenly a plain. What put in this way, and put in the context of the film Buried, what once was saturated with obstacles is now wide open, and what once was full of treacherous sort of things to overcome has now been cleared. And I think about that work, and in this moment, what's rising up in my heart is that, there is a certain sort of spiritual conviction to dig away the layers. And I feel like a lot of times, pivoting back to why I brought up my sorry question, we're content to just, I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. And it feels sometimes like we are unwilling, and I don't want to overly burden people who are like, geez, Reed, I'm feeling buried myself. Like, look, I get it. Right, there are days, sure, I feel buried. Like, God, there are days I want to be found. There's an old Andrew Osinga song, Jesus, you're going to have to come get me because it's too far to run tonight, and
that's a good song.
That is such a good song, there's an angel on my left shoulder and 10 devils on my right. Jesus, you'll have to come get me because it's too far to walk tonight. And I feel like there is this burden that is placed upon us that, I see you, Nathan, and I'm just going to use you and I because we're the ones in conversation here. I see you, and I see that, damn it, you're buried right now. Is there anything that I can do to dig away these layers? And maybe all that is just, I see you, and I know. We were having a conversation. I'm not going to get hyper political here, but it breaks my heart to hear this. We're having a conversation with some friends, and without getting into too many vulnerable specifics, these friends were sharing that they had a member of their family who was really in love with Jesus, and they say that without all of the trappings of superficiality. They were really in love with Jesus. They were also gay, and they were going to be going to a Bible camp so that they could learn more about Jesus. And this friend who was sharing this story began to cry in front of us and said, "Dear God, please," the person they were referring to is 14 years old. And they began to cry and say, "Dear God, please don't let that baby encounter anything that is going to make them think Jesus is not ready to receive them with open arms." And
Right.
they began to cry and kind of say, like, I really just worry for them as they navigate this space that, again, getting back to language I used earlier, that a bunch of people are going to be raising mountains and making plain paths rugged and creating valleys and everything, when I feel like our call and I feel like the burden that is placed upon us is to prepare the way for the Lord, that to borrow specifically Isaiah's scriptural language, to prepare the way of the Lord, to see you are buried under layers and layers and layers. What can I do to get my hands dirty, maybe, and dig you out of that? And that's not safe work, and that's very difficult. I remember the often quoted thing that Martin Luther King would talk about when he preached about the story of the Good Samaritan. He said, the question is not what will happen to me if I stop and help this man. The question is what will happen to him if I don't. And I feel like a lot of times in this fight that we have to see each other and to be seen, that it is sometimes hard work to sort of dig up the layers. In this film, Paul becomes increasingly more desperate to find somebody. Like, it's heartbreaking. Yes, it's got a practical narrative purpose, but how many times in the phone he screams, "Help me, help me. What are you doing to help me? Please help me." He doesn't, he's stuck in this situation. He is unable to help himself. And I feel like we are, a lot of us, in this place where we are desperate for connection, desperate for community, desperate for Christ, and desperate for God to feel. And I summarize those things together because of the passage of scripture that I like. It's like that's so much what we crave is for the rugged paths to be made plain and smooth, and for all of us to witness his glory, perhaps in each other, but definitely to see it together. And that's something that I feel like is a burden we too often will trade it transactionally for the opportunity to be right, or the opportunity to be good, or just the opportunity to acknowledge, "I'm so sorry," and then just wash our hands clean and move on down the path. And so many of these things are just sort of bouncing around in my head as I'm trying to wrangle all this down.
Last note for me that feels pertinent in the moment, and then we can end or drown in sand. Or maybe, who knows, maybe we're the snake and we just slither away.
Occupied.
No vacancy. It's funny. I really love that image, that to say metaphor feels too shallow, but that the job is to make a straight path, to raise the valleys and to lower the mountains, so that all know their possessive, their THEIR, they're welcome. It's funny. I'm going to point to a landmine and talk about it for a second.
Oh boy.
And then we'll walk to the end around it. I have a colleague who is this super crazy sports head, like nuts sports person. And also is like an old man with social media. And every now and then I'll see, you know how I hate how Facebook does it, but it does this, where it's like this person posted to this public post that has nothing to me. Like it, you aren't this, but let's say you were a quiche fan and you posted to quiche recipe of the day, and I saw it, and I'm like, well, I mean, I know Reed, and I love Reed, but I don't really care that you posted the quiche page.
Why are you telling me about his quiche love? Yeah.
Right. Well, this happened, but it was this person, and it was an article about trans women playing professional sports.
Oh, okay.
And what's unfortunate is this is a person who, in a number of ways, we're relatively simpatico, but because of his passion about sports and maybe some misguided worldviews, he was posting on this thing, and it was like, absolutely not, trans testosterone, these very unfortunately reductive arguments about trans women in professional sports. And where I'm going with this is keeping the valleys low and the mountains high. Because I had, purely by happenstance, I had read an article and I'd listened to a podcast about this exact subject.
Yeah.
Because ignore the issue of trans rights, but if we aren't actively trying to understand and comprehend the issues our brothers and sisters of any minority group or majority group are going through, we're doing a disservice to them. So I needed to kind of understand, just like, what is the conversation here? And I sent one of those to him, and I said, because I had seen his post, I brought up just in casual conversation, hey, I read this thing, you might be interested in it. And he totally was like, nope.
Oh, wow.
And then subsequent to that, I'd read something separate. So I'd read a thing and listened to a podcast. Well, I sent the podcast to him, and I said, listen to this. If you don't, it's worth, if you're going to have an opinion on this and you're going to blast it to social media, it kind of matters to like comprehend a little bit.
It does.
And I know that's a really flashpoint kind of subject to bring up, but the point is simply like, you can't, you are absolutely not doing the work of the Lord if your actions continue deepening valleys and heightening mountains. Like,
yeah, right.
And so I just love that metaphor, that imagery of like, whether it's for my own peace of mind, peace of spirit, so that I know best how to interact with brothers and sisters who aren't like me. Like, the work is making straight the path for my spirit to have some freedom from transaction. For others whose not spirits but active bodies are transgressed against by literal means, and collective means implemented against them. Anyway, my point is simply, I really love that, and that's hard. It's hard to
work,
to maintain that sort of energy of like, okay, am I actively making this harder for someone?
Oh God, like let it never. Oh God, like that hit me so hard. Like let it never be said of me that I made it harder for someone to either recognize that Jesus loved them, or to know that, or to find Jesus, or anything like that. Like, not that it's my responsibility to make sure that they do, and not it's my, none of that. But please, God, let it never be said that I made it harder. I mean, like that, like I want to make it easier. Like I want to make it easier. And there's going to be some who are sitting there like, oh, is that, very superficial kind of. No, if you think any of this is superficial, you are not listening. And I know that is a bold statement, but I won't apologize for it. If you think any of what I just said is, I'll quote.
Talking to me. I'm good, Reed.
No, I know. I'll quote John. No. I know. I was talking to the proverbial, all of the whatever the context.
The 10 devils on your right.
That's right. But but I was, John Locke arguing back to Jack, like, why do you think this is so easy? It's never been
easy, Jack.
I know, and it's like there's so much power in that realization. Like, this is not easy. This is not easy. But I would love it if I got to the end of a conversation. I would love it if I got to the end of an exploration, if I got to the end of a thought, if I got to the end of the walk, or any version of conclusion or parting ways of something. And to feel in that moment that for an inch, I made it a little bit easier for somebody to know that they were loved, that they were seen, that they were heard, and that there was a God who cared deeply for their fearful and wonderful maidenness, and that there was a tremendous degree of overwhelming and unbridled love and affection for who he made them to be. And I feel like if I could just center myself around that's just like, maybe for an inch, I made it easier. Sure, I can't knock down... Go ahead.
All I was going to say is, in the spirit of the movie, like, unbury, do the work of unburying each other and people of yourself. Hell, you know?
And maybe that was part. God, I keep going, but like, Jesus said, you could say to that mountain, "Be cast into the sea," and it'll obey you. And we use that context so much in terms of like, ooh, what can I accomplish in my life for me? But I'm like, man, in the context of this. Of something like that, there is saying to the proverbial you, there is a mountain in your way of recognizing and seeing how much you are loved, how deeply you are loved. And if I could, with the power of the Holy Spirit in my bone marrow, if I could say to that mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, man, would I? God, would I? And that is something that I get, as evidenced by the last 15 seconds of my voice rising. Like that's something I would get.
But if you're taking, but I mean, feel empowered, lackey. If you're taking the metaphor, if you're bridging the gap between these two, say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, married to Isaiah, which is make low every mountain. You can say to the person who is buried, be unburied, friend.
Be unburied.
Come along. I condescend to you so that we can rise together.
Be unburied. Good God. Like, in the name of Jesus, I do not say that flippantly. In the name of Jesus, be unburied.
Because of how much work the world, the systems of the world, antagonists in general have done to bury others. That is the act of making straight the path. Is you person in the world, I see your humanness, be unburied from the things that would render you unhuman.
Absolutely.
We gotta get out of here.
Oh my gosh, I could like land on this thing and like I could go for another hour. Oh my God. It's very, this is enlivening to my spirit. It is lifting to me. I don't feel under the weight of this movie anymore. I feel like this movie has given an opportunity to
exhumed.
I am exhumed. Yes, I am exhumed. And you know what? Exhumed is the right word, but God, I love the phrasing of be unburied. And unburied has a nice
absolutely.
Unburied has a nice pop to it. It does. It's very poetic. So you want to explain the fog meter to everybody for about this film?
The fog meter is our particular metric of what? Oh. The fog meter is our particular metric utilizing fear and God, how scary a thing is, how substantive a thing is, that we use to rate the films we discuss here on the Fear of God. Reed, how scary is Buried? Very scary.
It's terribly harrowing. It's very scary.
Terribly harrowing.
It's terribly harrowing. It look, it's claustrophobic. It's again, relentlessly intensifying circumstances as well. I mean, no, it's not the kind of thing that's gonna, startle you and make you jump, except for maybe the sequence with the snake. But I'm gonna give this a 10. I know, but listen, here's the thing: is like because like
there's a snake in my pants.
like when you think about what's going on in this movie, like
for sure.
I'm freaking like 10. It's terribly claustrophobic and harrowing. So yes, yeah, I did it.
I think the end pushes me over. I'm gonna go 9.
Yes,
I'm gonna
temper. You just
the 10 is occupied. I'm gonna go out the way I came.
Oh, there's somebody here already. I'm gonna move on the other leg.
Don't mind me. Don't mind me.
Sorry.
You didn't put the sign up, I didn't know.
Come here often. Oh. So 9 is your measurement.
Yes, a 9.
9 is your measurement.
Yeah,
And
yes.
so what about?
For God. Oh, God, help us. Unbury us from our sophomoric.
Ooh, so sophomoric.
Ooh.
Okay,
Speak for
so
yourself.
what would you say for the God measurement?
I mean, despite what could be problematic inciting incident, I still think it's organically constructed with a punch at the end that is less a twist and more perhaps an inevitability that you don't really know is inevitable.
Right.
But that really makes... I'm going to give it an 8. I don't think they intend the heft we gave it, but it's hard to deny you're telling a life or death story.
No, absolutely.
Like that's literally what you're engaging in. And so inherent to that choice, that story choice, is going to be big questions that are sort of posed inherently. Yeah.
Oh, understood. I think I'm going to join you in that 8. 8 was where I was kind of hovering. So your invocation of it sort of entrenched me in there. I think there is a lot on its mind. We didn't hit it hard in the early stages of the conversation, and I won't hit it hard now, but I agree with you. I think it's worth putting a little asterisk on, like, okay, is the inciting incident problematic? But then once it gets into that, I definitely feel like there's a lot more going on to it that than merely the potential political landscape that put him there. That is definitely on the film's mind. And so to that end, I would give it an 8. And that means that we give Buried, the film by Rodrigo Cortes, a 9 out of 10 on the fog meter. That's a strong showing for ye old fog meter.
That is a strong showing. That's higher than I thought we'd end up.
I did, yeah, likewise. But would you recommend Buried to people?
Yeah, it's economical, it's inventive. It does not. I'll frame it this way: power couple they may be. hashtag power couple. To me, this is a more believable setup than the Shallows.
Sure. Yeah.
No, which I know that's unfair to compare them. I'm just saying, like, I'm elevating what they do in Buried as okay, I can buy why this is happening and kind of go along with it.
No,
so yeah, I dig it.
Understood. I would recommend it as well. It's harrowing. I think there's going to be some people who at the end will be like, man, why did I put myself through that? But I think it's a really inventive and very affecting film.
Well, we didn't even talk about, I love some of the shots. Like, I love the rotating outside the coffin shots that kind of pivots down into it. So stuff like that. Yeah. It's good at what it does.
One of the ones that, and it's a fake out, but one of the ones that I really responded strongly to is the one where and this may be what you were referring to, but like the camera continues to climb. So he's buried.
Yes.
And so it's this image, like an overhead shot of him, but it continues to climb as if the walls went up forever, Yes. And, obviously in the literal, they don't, but I thought that was a really powerful visual image of just, and what I took in that moment of like, just the walls go on forever is just how far he feels like he has to go to get out of this thing. It was just, it is pretty inventive, visually speaking. And so, I recommend it as well. Thank you, Ernst, very, very much for, pushing us towards covering Buried. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully listeners, you have as well. Next week, we're going to do this again, and we're going to be pivoting to another What Scares Us submission, this time from one of our good listener friends, and he's taken us back to the Wes Craven franchise of Scream. But we covered Scream 1 already, and you would think the next installment would be Scream 2, but no. We're going to be going to Scream 4. Quattro, okay? Scream.
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 We got to get out of here.
It's late. We're going to Scream 4 next week, directed by Wes Craven, starring all the usual suspects. So check out Scream 4 specifically. For those who may not be caught up on the entire franchise, you don't really need to have seen every single entry in the franchise to appreciate what Scream 4 does. It probably would be good to at least have seen the first one, but no need to have seen every single thing before getting to Scream 4. So if you've never seen the first one, I'd recommend acquainting yourself with the first one and with our episode about it, and then watching Scream 4. If you've already seen Scream 1 and haven't caught up with the rest, just catch up with Scream 4. You will probably be fine. And meet us here next week. Nathan, thank you as always for these conversations. Can't thank you enough for them, honestly. And as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Be unburied.
Amen.
See you next week, guys.
See you guys later. Okay, bye-bye.